I see my role as an angel advocate, as a positive presence to them and a support to them to, yes, ask good questions and ask good skeptical questions at time to challenge their growth forward. But everything is not in trying to be a devil's advocate, but is in the spirit of being an angel advocate. I'm going to be supportive to your vision, what you want, and then help be a presence that's not going to just point out the things you're doing wrong, but to help say, how can I support you in further development and behaviors that are going to support the vision and the culture and the type of leader and person you want to be moving forward.
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world.
Hello, everybody. It's Jason, and welcome back to Season 4 of the podcast. Again, so excited that we're here in Season 4. Amazing that we're already at Season 4 in this thing. Thank you for everybody who, wherever you are and however you're arriving to this podcast today, thank you for being a part of it. We've received so much great positive feedback and positive mojo about Seasons 1, 2, and 3, and so we're excited to continue this into Season 4 and excited about all that is to come in the episodes ahead. So as always, my hope with these podcasts is that this is an opportunity wherever you might be in your own journey, in your own life, your work, your career. This is an opportunity for you to step back, to think, to engage your mind and heart in what's most important to you, and also then for it to lead to intentional action for you, for whatever way you're coming to this. The way you're thinking about this is the way you lead your own personal life, the way that you're leading with the team and organization you serve, your family, your friends, your community, whatever that is for you. My hope is that this is an opportunity, again, for you to step back, to think, to be engaged with your mind and heart, and then for it to lead to intentional action. What are we going to go do because of these kind of thoughts that are hopefully nudging us forward in all the positive and supportive ways? So again, thank you for being a part of today. I hope you'll keep listening in Season 4. Thank you to everybody out there who obviously is listening, subscribing to the podcast, anybody who takes the time to rate 5 stars, of course, and leave a positive review on whatever podcast platform you're using. Those are the ways that the algorithms help us share this even further and help amplify the messages so more and more people can find the podcast and experience the messages a part of this. So thank you to everybody who takes the time to do that. It's really, really important. We're in a new year. 2021 is here. We're all doing high fives and cartwheels and excited that 2021 is here, because 2020 was a challenging year on many fronts. Political challenges, economic challenges, global pandemic, civil unrest, social justice, kids schooling, all of those things that we've talked about in the past. 2020 was a challenging year, but also a year of growth, I think, for all of us. And so as we've moved into 2021, many of those challenges and obstacles are not fully behind us. Of course, they carry forward to us, and the hope is that we are, especially as a part of this podcast, focusing on the things that are within our control, not the things that are swirling around us that are seemingly out of our control, but in the midst of a world where there are challenges and obstacles around, what are the things that are within our control, and what are the positive ways that we're going to choose to show up in the way that we lead and the culture that we create with the people around us, to put the focus on what is within our control. So I'm excited you're here. And today, for this nugget, again, hopefully this format of the podcast has been great for you. These micro pods, smaller, shorter pods that give you a thought or something to ponder, to think about, that nudges us all forward. And then those longer interviews and conversations with other thought leaders. I hope you are enjoying this kind of format. And today I want to discuss the difference and really the importance behind the difference between skepticism rather than cynicism. Skepticism rather than cynicism. And the difference between being a skeptic and being a cynic. And what sparked this idea, or why this idea began to grow in me, and why I'm going to choose to kind of expand on it and focus on it today, this resonated with me is actually came from a story that my good friend Doug Ullman, CEO of Pelotonia, which if you didn't listen to that podcast interview or that extended conversation, I really hope you'll go back and find it and listen to it. A great conversation. Doug's an amazing person, and a lot of great insights came from that conversation with Doug and the Fuller podcast. But this idea that he shared, in one story in particular, about this difference between skepticism and cynicism, I wanted to break apart that a little bit in more detail and spend a little bit more time on its own podcast about this idea, because I think it's really important for the world that we're in today. So I hope you'll listen to that extended conversation with Doug. But for today, I just want to quickly kind of dive into this idea. And again, the story that he shared with me is one for, he was on an airplane one time, and one of the last seats open on the airplane was right next to him. And as the last people are getting on the plane, a voice comes walking down the center aisle of the plane, and he knows that he recognizes the voice as he hears him talking to people as he's making his way down. And then sure enough, he looks up, and the voice is Dan Rather, the national TV news anchor that was so famous. And he heard this voice, and he just knew it was somebody that he recognized, and he looked up, and it was Dan Rather. And then, of all the seats on the plane, the one empty seat that was left was right next to Doug, and so Dan came in and sat in that seat. And, as they started to converse, to just talking small talk with each other as Dan sat in his seat, Doug had his laptop computer open and was typing away on it. But I think Dan Rather, as Doug tells the story, is that Dan Rather thought that he was just, doing work. But really, the whole time they were talking, Doug was taking notes on the conversation because he didn't want to forget any of this unique conversation that he was lucky to have on this flight, sitting there talking with Dan Rather. And so he's sitting there typing away on his laptop and taking notes and tracking their conversation so he doesn't miss anything. And so Dan Rather goes into this story with Doug, and he says to him in a very poignant way, he said, when I was trained as a journalist, we were trained to be skeptical. As a journalist, we had to be skeptical. And what that meant was we need to ask questions. And they were trained this way. They were taught this way, that what it means to ask skeptical questions is to ask questions so that you better understand the situation and try to seek to understand someone else's point of view. And so the asking of a skeptical question, you had to be trained to ask that question and be skeptical, because but the spirit in which you're asking it is you're asking it to try to better understand their situation, their point of view. You're asking the question in order to try to understand them or the situation better. And then he turned to Doug and he said, but nowadays, people are less skeptical and are way more cynical. People are less skeptical and way more cynical. He said now, not just journalists, but other people seem to ask not just skeptical questions where they're seeking to understand, but they ask cynical questions. And the cynical questions are when they're not seeking to understand the other person's point of view or to understand the situation in more depth, but they're asking cynical questions where they're actually just trying to catch somebody, catch the person on the other end of the question they're asking. They're asking something, a leading question that isn't trying to understand the other person's point of view or to understand their situation better, but rather to confirm their own premise and almost kind of trap the person in whatever question they're trying to ask. The questions are becoming more cynical than skeptical. They're becoming gotcha questions, where I'm asking the question just because I'm trying to get you. I'm trying to trap you in a corner. I'm trying to prove a premise that I've already come to in my mind. And so I'm not seeking to understand your point of view or your situation. I'm just coming at it from a cynical point of view of distrust and a cynical point of view of trying to catch you in doing something wrong. That story jumped out to me because we all live in the world that we live in today, which as I heard that story and as Doug and I talked about it, and we even talked about it again on that longer pod about our own lives and the world that we're living in and how we see this kind of playing out in front of us in our communities and certainly within teams and organizations, but also friendship groups and gossip and the world that we live in today. We all live in this world. And, hopefully we're not always, none of us, or some people on here may be journalists. You may be a journalist and this may be really resonating with you because you're remembering that training of trying to be skeptical and not cynical. But none of us, want to be walking around as if we are journalists because none of us really, again, very few of us probably on this podcast are actual journalists, where our job is not to be skeptical. And certainly is not to be cynical. And so we want to make sure that we're not getting dragged into this kind of fixating in this time and place and getting stuck in this thinking that our job is to ask all of these skeptical and cynical questions. It's not always our job. But yet the world that we live in, it's really easy, especially on social media and across the platforms and also in this in a world where gossip is everywhere. Hopefully we're not always the poster, the person posting the thing on social media. I hope we're not. But it's easier to hide behind a computer and lob in this kind of criticism or cynicism in the midst of everything we do and kind of hide behind those cynical comments without even trying to understand the other side or the other point of view. It's way easier to do that, to lob in this kind of cynical nature. And it's easy to do that in our groups of friends, in our gossip, and certainly within teams and organizations. It's easier to sit back and just be cynical and distrust things than it is to ask questions that are trying to understand, but also trying to move things forward. And so a skeptic, if you look at the definition of what a skeptic is somebody that's not easily convinced and that is having doubts or reservations. And so they're asking a question to try to understand the situation. And again, I'm not suggesting that all of us are journalists, so we don't want to be trapped in this kind of skeptical thinking all the time either. But as leaders and as people in a world, oftentimes we need to be able to step in and ask questions that are trying to better understand someone else's situation and understand what we're trying to do so that we can move beyond those doubts and reservations and into what are we going to do about it. So a skeptic certainly is somebody who's not easily convinced and is having those doubts or reservations, but is somebody that's also asking the question to try to better understand a situation or a person that they don't understand. The definition of a cynic is someone that's believing that people are motivated only by their self-interest, and by the cynical nature, they just distrust everything. And they distrust the situation. And certainly we all know there are times and places where we need to be, that warrant us being cynical, but we don't want to be trapped in either one of these spaces of only being a skeptic or a cynic. In my coaching practices, where oftentimes I'm working with leaders and teams and organizations over the long haul, but with leaders that I'm coaching, I oftentimes in the midst of the journey of helping them develop and helping them vision and then raise their level of the way they show up and lead the culture that they create around them, I talk about my role as a coach. And the way I describe it is that I give them the difference between a devil's advocate And I explain to them that my role as a coach, I don't see it this way. There may be other executive coaches and other people out there in the world that would see it this way, that they see their role as being a devil's advocate. But I don't. I explain to the people that I'm working with that I don't see my role as that of a devil's advocate, because a devil's advocate is somebody who's always shooting holes in something. They're always pointing out what's wrong or what's not working or what won't work. And so no matter what the situation is, a devil's advocate is somebody say, yeah, well, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. Here's why it won't work, or here's the other side that and we all know people in our lives. And again, there are times and places where we need to step in and play the role of a devil's advocate. But we also know there are people that get trapped in that role, that there's always a way to point out what's not working and to be kind of a devil's advocate. But I don't see my role as a coach as a devil's advocate. Instead, I explain to them that I see it as an angel advocate, which the difference is in the way that I see my role as a coach is that I don't see my role as just to shoot holes in something or what's wrong or what won't work or just to challenge their point of view. I see my role as an angel advocate, as a positive presence to them and a support to them to, yes, ask good questions and ask good skeptical questions at time to challenge their growth forward. But everything is not in trying to be a devil's advocate, but is in the spirit of being an angel advocate. I'm going to be supportive to your vision, what you want, and then help be a presence that's not going to just point out the things you're doing wrong, but to help say, how can I support you in further development and behaviors that are going to support the vision and the culture and the type of leader and person you want to be moving forward. And I'm going to be a supportive angel advocate to you along the way that helps nudge you and this relationship forward. I have no doubt that there will be time in the near future, I'm not sure when, but where there will be power in congregating again, power in bringing your whole team together, your entire company and organization together in one space for that powerful keynote speech, that discussion that has to happen as a team, an entire organization about leadership and culture and mindset. But until then, we are in a virtual world. And so if I can add value to your team, your company, or organization through a virtual keynote speech, or just helping your team and organization have the conversation that's the currency for change that you need to be having internally, I hope you'll track us down and let us know how we can be helpful at jasonvbarger.com. Angel advocates absolutely ask good questions. That, some of which are questions that are going to challenge us. Angel advocates ask good questions, they challenge us, but in the end, they have our best interest in mind, and they're asking the question not to just get you, or not just to challenge you or point out something. They're asking the question that's meant to support you and nudge you forward and move you in a direction that you may not be able to go purely on your own. And so good skeptical questions can help be a powerful thing for, again, we don't want to just live in this space where we're always questioning, we're always skeptical about everything. We want to make sure there's a time and place where we're saying, well, hold on, this is an opportunity to ask good questions that are going to be clarifying questions for us so that we can move ourselves forward and have the best interest of people and the mission and the culture in place and how we're going to try to support it. But good skeptical questions can be powerful and also very clarifying for teams or groups of any kind. And so, but when we come to them, we have to come to them with the spirit that we are seeking to understand. We're seeking to understand something that we don't understand. We're seeking to understand somebody else. We're seeking to understand a situation. We're trying to see a different point of view. And oftentimes, the kind of good questions that we can ask is to step back and say, wait, hold on a second. What is our real mission? Let's clarify the question here. Let's make sure that as we're not just racing ahead, we're asking these good questions about what is our real mission for what we're trying to accomplish. Let's be clear about what are we really trying to accomplish here. And so sometimes it can come across and feel like a skeptical question, but really it becomes a clarifying question to make sure that, again, I'm not asking the question just because I'm trying to get you, or I'm trying to challenge just for the sense of challenge, or to be a devil's advocate just to be a devil's advocate. I'm asking the question because I'm challenging and wanting the group to clarify. Hold on a second, let's get clear. What is it we're really trying to accomplish here? Those questions, those good questions we ask about what if, all of those what if questions. I talk about that in some of my books, the power of a what if question, the time and space that we allow ourselves individually, but then also in teams and organizations to consider those kind of what if questions. What if we took a different approach next time? What if we found a different way to do things or a different way to operate? What if we were looking for a different outcome? What would that different outcome be that we want? Those kinds of questions, whether we're debriefing a situation we just experienced, or we proactively are saying, hold on, let's make sure that we're clarifying. What do we want the outcome to be? What do we want the mission to be? What are we trying to accomplish? Did we have the right intentions in mind when we made that last decision or that last conversation? All of those questions are powerful questions that an angel advocate would ask, someone that has our best interest in mind, who's seeking to understand and ultimately wants to support us and help us move forward. But there's a fine line between being skeptical and cynical. And we don't want to get trapped in either one all the time, but we need to know there's a time and place to ask skeptical questions. Very few times where there's an opportunity to be cynical, and we're worthy of being cynical. We don't want to be trapped in either place, but we want to be that angel advocate that asks good questions, clarifying questions that helps move us forward, helps us seek to understand somebody else's point of view and the situation at hand, and then help us move forward to create the vision and the culture of the relationships and the culture within our teams and organizations that we want to create. So some questions to ponder for this week in your own journey, your own life, your own role as a leader or in the culture that you serve. Some questions to ponder. Who are you an angel advocate for? Who is it that you're an angel advocate for? Not just a devil's advocate who points holes or questions things or asks, again, who is it that you're an angel advocate for? A positive presence, a support, asks clarifying and questions that nudge us forward, but then are part of that supportive journey along the way. Who are you an angel advocate for? Where are you in your own daily practice or daily experience in your team and organization? Can you identify times where you're skeptical and you're asking skeptical questions? Or can you catch yourself? When is it that maybe you've slipped into that cynical questioning where you're not asking the question really to seek to understand or to try to understand a different point of view, but you're really asking the question just to kind of get somebody, the gotcha kind of questions? Where is that happening in your team culture? And how can you help ask clarifying questions and be an angel advocate to move things forward and not get stuck in that cynical nature? Remember, where we look is where we go. What we give our focus, our heart, our attention to is where we end up going. So if where we look and what we give our focus to is being cynical, of being distrustful, of gossiping, of who's to blame, it's somebody else's fault all the time, if we're lobbing in just criticism, another podcast I did a while back is this idea of criticulous, if we're always the critic who's just lobbing things in, where we look is where we go. But if we want to be something different, if we want to fix our eyes, our heart, and our focus on being an angel advocate, then what does that look like to ask clarifying questions, to nudge us forward around the mission, the purpose, what are we trying to accomplish, and how do we all take personal ownership in the next actions that are going to nudge us forward and bring about real positive growth. So where we look is where we go, and our words, our language, and our questions are important, and the spirit in which we ask them will help guide the way. Where we look is where we go. Let's ask good questions and be an angel advocate to the people along our path.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.